So how's your pubic wiggling, Dave?
It's a little bit itchy.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's the adhesive that's causing the problem, isn't it? You think? It's just...
People get very upset when I show them.
Yeah, you say, "Do you want to see my wig?" Oh my word!
Hi, this is Steve, and here are some more of my gaming vexes. Hello, and welcome to another of my gaming vexes, where I and the lovely people I game with document my ongoing mission to at least play, but preferably run, all of the tabletop role-playing games that sit on the shelves in my gaming den. If you listen very closely, you can probably hear the creak as yet another game, Star Trek Adventure 2nd Edition, is added to the ever-growing collection. More on that next time. This time, however, we're looking back on our experiences of playing Free League's Forbidden Lands. After our last episode covering the Savage Worlds version of Palladian Games' Rift setting, there was some justified grumbling that I didn't make clear what Rifts actually is. My own defence here is that getting an episode out the virtual door is essentially a solitary pursuit when you get down to editing, etc. Combine this with my generally solipsistic outlook, and as Rifts seem to be everywhere all the time from the early 90s onwards, my assumption, wrongly, was that of course everyone knows what Rifts is, so no need to explain. Lesson learned. From this point on, I'll try to give at least a little bit of thought to giving a summary of the game and the discussion, even if that mostly means me reading out the Wikipedia entry or something similar. Before we get into the episode proper, we've had some more reviews. As has been said in other podcasts, sometimes it's difficult to find reviews, and as they are generally so infrequent, you often forget to look. However, reviews are the lifeblood of motivation for podcasters. Even an infrequent prod to the pleasure centres of the brain is enough to keep us going. So although I was late picking these up, I'm very thankful for the positive feedback. It happens that both of these reviews are from Australian listeners. First of all, from way back in October 2022, comes this 5-star review from _Anzel. A well-balanced, constructive and informed take on tabletop role-playing games. With some regulars also having their own podcast, it's like a role-playing supergroup, but the lead singer sounds a little like Paul Hollywood. If you're still a listener, Ansel, thank you. It must be very difficult to navigate the range of accents on offer, so I'm assuming it's old Scouser himself that you think sounds like the estimable Mr. Hollywood. He'll be thrilled at the comparison, I'm sure. Paul Hollywood, that is. Secondly, there's this likewise 5-star review from Mato Fumi in December 2023. Really good discussion of tabletop role-playing games from people who have played the games, not just read the book. So entertaining, so informative. Listen up. Thanks, Matafumi. Much appreciated. If you like what you hear, not just from this podcast, but from any of your regular listens, please consider giving them a 5-star review. I know it can be a pain navigating the review function on your pod platform of choice, but please persevere. Knowing that the time spent recording and editing this stuff is appreciated by someone makes a huge difference, honestly. But for now, let's enter the Forbidden Lands. From Free League itself. Rogues and raiders in a cursed world. Forbidden Lands is a new take on classic fantasy role-playing. In this sandbox survival role-playing game, you're not heroes sent on missions dictated by others. Instead, you're raiders and rogues bent on making your own mark on a cursed world. You'll discover lost tombs, fight terrible monsters, wander the wild lands, and if you live long enough, build your own stronghold to defend. So Forbidden Lands is a fantasy role-playing game published by Free League Publishing, published in 2018. It takes place in a medieval fantasy post-apocalyptic setting, where the destruction has limited itself to one kingdom. A fatal mist which had killed any person venturing outside at night has cleared. Adventurers may now explore the uninhabited castles and cities left behind. Player characters have 4 main attributes: strength, agility, wit and empathy, Unlike most other role-playing games, Forbidden Lands does not use a hit point mechanic to measure combat damage. Instead, physical damage directly reduces strength, while psychic damage reduces wits. PCs, player characters, can earn willpower, which is used to trigger certain talents. In order to generate willpower, players must re-roll failed checks, at the risk of taking further damage to their attributes or to their gear. The result of one, otherwise known as a Bane, will cause a temporary reduction to the relevant stat or gear involved, and each Bane will generate 1 point of willpower. Writing for Tabletop Gaming, Richard Janssen Parks called the game a delightfully old-school take on the traditional art fantasy RPG, creating a sense of freedom that rewards GMs for a hands-off approach and allows the players to truly forge their own destiny. He noted that although the game sought to give an old-school feel, the mechanics have propelled the game along are thoroughly modern and supported by a few rather fascinating innovations. The single frustration Janssen Parks found was that the towns and villages seemed plucked straight from a conventional dark fantasy world, rather than one where settlements were forced to survive in near isolation for hundreds of years. These may seem petty concerns, but the Blood Mist is such a fascinating idea that it's frustrating when it fails to gel with the details. Despite this, he concluded this doesn't change the fact that Forbidden Lands is a beautiful game that offers a chance for players to experience something that captures the feel of old-school adventuring but still feels fresh. It's well worth a look for anyone looking for something different to their fantasy gaming. John O'Neill reviewed Forbidden Lands for Black Gate and stated that last thing I need is another fantasy role RPG crowding my shelves, especially one in a generic fantasy setting. But the evocative text sold me on the promise of a dark world far removed from routine high fantasy tropes, and characters that sounds a lot closer to sword and sorcerer archetypes than I'm used to. In terms of awards, at 2019 ENnie Awards, it won gold in 2 categories, Best Cartography and Best Production Values, and won silver in 2 categories, Best Rules and Product of the Year. At the 2019 Origins Awards, finalist in the category Best Role-Playing Game. And so far, what's been released: campaigns, so Raven's Purge, The Bitter Reach, The Blood March, a collection of scenarios, The Crypt of the Mellified Mage and the Spire of Quetzal, and a bestiary, The Book of Beasts. And so with that, what did we think about it? Get ready. So we're going to have a chat about our experience, our extended experience, I think, of playing Forbidden Lands. So first of all, we're going to go around the virtual room, introduce yourself, Twitter handles, and then a little bit about your character in Forbidden Lands, and then we'll just launch into it.
Hello, Dave Patterson, on various social media platforms, usually at Dave Patters, or for some reason the Bagpuss Grognard, which I haven't quite figured out myself. My character within Forbidden Lands, and for some reason I keep wanting to call it Savage Worlds, I have no idea why, but Forbidden Lands, was a halfling, Boldo Flatfoot, who was essentially a stealth-based character who, in homage to Cat, Mir for Beer, Cat, was very good at throwing things, as was her, the Star Wars thing. Not a Wookiee, the little ones. Ewok, that's it. In homage to the Ewok, he was very good at throwing things. And amazingly enough, Boldo Flatfoot managed to stay alive. Which
you say stealth-based, it didn't stop him charging a dragon, though, did it?
No.
Which everyone else
Stealth-based and stupid, yeah. So that was me, Boldo Flatfoot.
Excellent. Right. What about you, Sam?
Yeah, I'm Sam. Of course, Sam Zero Veil on all the socials. My character was a dwarven fighter called Ox, armed with warhammer and shield. Bit of a hammer fighter. Styled himself as the strongest of all warriors.
Strongest of all warriors.
And in fact, turned out to be the only warrior in the group, which was sometimes
and a good job.
It's a bit harsh. It's a bit harsh. I mean,
that's true, though, isn't it?
You were the only warrior class, I guess. But that's like me going, I was the only fucking druid in the group.
Well, in a game that does involve quite a bit of combat, it's quite useful to have combat-type characters.
And quite a bit of healing as well.
It started early.
Yeah, certainly the way that we played it. Yeah.
I love this game. All right, Neil B, what about you?
Okay, Neil B. I am Old Scouse RP Blue Sky on Blue Sky, of course, and Old Scouser RPing on Twitter, and variations thereof in other places. So I was playing Tara, who's a wolfkin, so that's like a anthropomorphic wolf, I guess, and she was a druid. She is a druid. She still lives, and she was she could be a bit fighty. Obviously not as much of a warrior as Ox, all bow to Ox, the mighty warrior. But she was I think the thing that kept her alive more than anything else, particularly when the rest of the party might have wanted to kill her, was her ability to heal. And she put herself at risk quite a few times due to the wonderful healing system of Forbidden Lands. Yeah, so that's Tara.
I think the only way that Tara stayed alive was kind of coming very, very close to death and passing out, and then being rescued by everybody because your dice rolls were so bloody awful.
Yeah. There was a few times I recall that, because you have that, is it corruption or backlash or something when you, and a couple of times she cast, I think there's that time it came out of those caves and she healed somebody, and then she was like, she had her brain fried for 6 days. So everyone had to sit around for 6 days waiting for it to, yeah. Great stuff. Great stuff.
Oh, happy days.
Happy days.
Last but no means least, Neil H.
Yeah, I think that was me you were healing, and my goodness, we need it. Yeah. So Neil H, Satsuma or Thermal Satsuma on the socials, and I played Larian, a half-elf hunter, because I sort of thought I might be good at going and catching food and hitting things from a distance, but in practice it turned out I was usually critically wounded or had something that stopped me from using my bow for a considerable amount of the time. Gradually got a bit better, I think, over time.
Yeah, gradually got a bit better. Everybody did. So we played. I mean, we've actually started playing this about 3 years ago, didn't we? It was it's a good long while ago. And so history is we sort of buy the great box, because as we've sort of said, it's a lovely box and all the stuff looks really nice. So it's Free League, so of course it looks great. So you buy the box, and then there's a good Foundry system for it, which is a prerequisite usually for most games getting played. And we started playing it. So so when we first played it, what was your? I think everybody here was playing that while ago. I think it was.
No, I wasn't. I was a
you joined late.
Yeah.
Okay, but so Dave, Sam,
Neil, Andrew, Zos 93, Andrew.
Yeah.
Who very definitely took against it.
He did not enjoy the experience, it's fair to say. So, okay, so that was 3 years ago. So when we played that, what was your opinion of Forbidden Lands at that point? We've played about 6 sessions, so go on, Sam.
Well, initially when we started, we just created characters with no knowledge of how the game worked or what we were doing. Consequently, I did what I always do and created a character which is a simple character with strong bias towards one aspect, or combat in this particular instance. For one-shot play, you need to try and stand out a bit, I think, and that's what I thought we were doing. So I did. But the campaign's, of course, different in that you can develop over time, but being a bit crap at everything isn't great for one-shot play, which is our initial goal. So these initial characters are thrown into a situation which we were not prepared for, absolutely not prepared for, such as we had poor supply of torches, no food, no water. All of that turned out to be critically important for the game. Therefore, we were struggling. We were struggling to do anything.
That sounds like you've never played a role-playing game before there, Sam. They're all speaking like that.
However, my character turned out to be quite fun to play in a sort of one-dimensional, hit it hard type of way.
Yeah. Fair to say that you said that Sam and Ox emerged from those first. I think we played about 5 or 6 sessions, something like that, with a sense of didn't really quite work, but we're curious to learn a little bit more. As you say, Andrew, Zos 93, came out of that session thinking, I never want to see Forbidden Lands ever again. It didn't come back. We'll come to you in a minute, Neil. Neil, it's just what brought you into it. But let's go to Dave first, then we'll come to Neil B in terms of your thoughts coming out of that first experience a few years ago.
So we are missing obviously Howard, who played Hemony, who was sort of a magic user. a goblin, wasn't she? And
That's right, yeah.
subsequently turned into dragonkin or lizardkin or whatever it was. The first, I have to say, a bit like Sam was sort of describing, I think it was woefully unprepared. It wasn't the game's fault, funnily enough. I think it was as you quite rightly said, Sam, I think it was our fault for not really understanding that resource management was a big part of the game. But I think subsequently when we played it the second time round, once you'd figured out actually, okay, well, we do need to take notice of resources. We do need to, we do need to resupply. We do need to hunt for things. We do need to have slightly differentiated characters. Then I think it really sort of clicked in. So although we've sort of talked about this before in relation to other games and stuff, the fact is, it's a big group of friends who are having a good time playing a game, and it actually becomes quite sort of a bonding experience that you tend to come very close to death on a regular basis. Yeah. But it actually, once you then did get used to it, I think the other bit that I found a little bit difficult in the first instance was the sort of the hex crawl bit. Kind of thought, whoa, is that a bit too much like a step into, the fantasy trip or something? And then, but again, it was good because it was new and different, and every time something else happened, rather than being perhaps a little bit formulaic. So I'd say I think Sam's point is absolutely really well made. If you're going to play Forbidden Lands, make sure you understand what the sort of the basics are within the game. It's not one of those you can just leap into and hope that you sort of survive, because I think it then becomes a bit frustrating. I think if Andrew had come back and played the second time round, it would have been a totally different game for him, a bit like it was, I think, for everybody.
Yeah. So I think you're right.
I think Dave and Sam have nailed it. There was, I think, knowing the game is part of it. I think the thing that drew me to it was that, it's kind of said it's like an old school style game with like modern rules, and old school in it's like it's quite deadly, and it's kind of a bit procedural as well. So I was really interested in that side of it, and I love a good hex crawl. I think it was that we just weren't really prepared for how to play the game. So I think there's a definite element of you do need to know how to play the game and understand what you're getting into. And I think some of the times, when we went into that tower, and I always enjoyed it, but I think at that point I was thinking, I don't really know, like, apart from having modern rules, what this does that like an old school game actually doesn't do. It felt very kind of old school, but I think then I enjoyed it, but because you had that feeling of, particularly when your characters are new and you're getting into fights and you're just getting absolutely battered and running away from things. That's like, I quite like that, but that's the old school kind of, you kind of going, okay, well, we can't, maybe we shouldn't be fighting these things. We shouldn't be fighting everything. Let's pick our battles. Let's be careful. Let's try and put things in our advantage if we do have to fight, and so on. And I think that became apparent, as we went through that first time playing it. But I think when we came back to it, and I'm sure we'll dig into this a bit more, it did. I know you and I talked about it a few times on and off, and I think there's definitely a mindset that you have to have as player and GM. And I don't think it's like a difficult thing to acquire. I just think you've just got to kind of put yourself in the right frame of mind to play it. And I think once you kind of get to grips with that, it's a really enjoyable game, and it's the procedural elements that kind of get out the way relatively quickly. So you kind of you feel like you're still very immersed in the world and what's going on.
So we came out of that first few sessions. So picture the scene. So your party come out of a tower having sort of fought off undead nasties, and then you thought, right, we'll because characters have got skills, so why wouldn't they use them? Okay, so lesson number one was don't roll unless you have to, okay? Because what happened was the party decided to do a bit of hunting, bit of foraging, and essentially everybody failed their rolls. So the scene, you know, as the scene fades to black on the screen, was like the party just lying in ditches with wounds or with infected, you know, wounds, or just sick, or just, you know, what it was awful. And I thought that was a perfect place to stop it. But I thought to myself, there's something to this. I think there's more we can get out. It wasn't a very satisfying experience, or satisfying as I think it could be. So hence, 3 years later, or 2.5 years later, because we played quite a lot of sessions this second time round, we came back to it. So obviously you guys came on board, and then we had a new player as well. So we had Neil H. So what was it that drew you to sort of dipping your toe in the forbidden lands, miasma?
Well, I think for me, it's the Free League Association. It's like ticking another one off, because you know it's going to be a quality game with interesting mechanics and something to it. So my first impression was it seemed a bit overwhelming. There were lots of these systems that were going on that it wasn't immediately obvious how they all worked together. I think the first dungeon that we were in was way over our capability. So I was feeling, oh yeah, that's, you know, what we're doing here. But then we got out of that and started going through the hexes and you get into a rhythm with it. Of that, you've got the day's weather, and you roll for your food and your water going down, and somebody goes out hunting, which, you know, that's where I found, right, I can do something, and it's useful, and that's topping up the food. And as we were going and uncovering another hex, and you'd get an encounter, and that would just be enough of a, you know, a challenge, and then you're back into the routine of the procedures. So that was when it grabbed me. I think it was that sort of, oh yeah, we're on a journey, we're doing things, we've got these, yeah, we can go anywhere on this huge map. And I think we just uncovered a tiny little bit at the top by the time we finished, but it feels like a big world that you could go anywhere, and
definitely
that's a really interesting concept in a game.
I think you're right. So I think just touching on the rules, okay, so as you said, Neil, I think you have to come to it with a particular mindset, certainly as a player and as a GM. So my natural situation, as all of you all know, it takes me a while to get to grip with rules, and my natural inclination is to sort of not hand wave it, but to sort of try and work through it as quickly as possible. But with this one, I thought to myself, right, there's a lot of crunch to this, and I'm going to stick to it. Okay, so if you haven't got torches, you can't see anything, and part of it is about enforcing the world on the players. And you're not trying to tell a story, Neil. What you are trying to do is you're working through a set of procedures and rules. And so for me, one of the things that I had to come into is, right, you know, there's the combat, there's the social interaction, there's the hex crawl, there's the resource management, all the things that you referred to, Dave. So I came into this second run at it with that in mind. And I think, you know, so Neil, you talked about the map. It is a hex crawl, and because we were playing it on Foundry, there's some fantastic, I mean, the Foundry implementation is fantastic, first of all, and also there's some really great modules that complement it. So like a map that will uncover itself as you're sort of traveling around the hexes. So, you know, there is a sense of mystery, and also lots of random monsters and that sort of stuff. So let's just talk a little bit about rules, what we like, what we don't like. So combat, it's a big part of the game. What do we think about it? How does it work in practice?
I really quite like the combat. As long as you select the right talents and abilities, you can do pretty well in combat. It's fairly quick and pretty brutal as a system, but not instantly fatal, as instantly fatal as Neil was probably making out there. We've had plenty of critical wounds in the party. I only lost one character so far, and that was because they got separated from the group and nobody could help them. Combination of adding dice from lots of different areas means you've got a pretty good chance of hitting things. You've got your strength, your melee skill, your weapon type, and a talent. So you can, you know, I mean, Ox is rolling up to 14, sometimes 16 dice to try and
well,
get
it's the strongest in all of the Forbidden Lands.
Well, so yeah. So what do you expect? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of chance to actually hit people.
Yeah.
So
I think when you're up against, so you're right. I mean, the system is classic, some, you know, year zero engine. So essentially looking for sixes and not ones. or skulls as they are on the Forbidden Lands dice. I think what's great, like a lot of other Free League games, is there's the shall I push it? If you push the roll, you might end yourself. I mean, as you say, characters will get broken quite easily, but it's actually quite hard to die. It's difficult to do that. So I quite like that sort of risk reward sort of side of things.
Yeah. Another thing about the combat, which was great, was that Foundry did a huge amount of heavy lifting when it came to rolling dice and actually auto-calculating for your character sheet as well. So that really took a lot of pain out of it for me. I really like that.
Dave?
I was just going to say, actually, that the other thing about it being, it does have that old school feel, but the modern sort of sensibilities about it was, and lots of different skills and talents and so on. There were lots of options within combat. So as you were just saying there, Sam, thank God for Foundry, because it would have been an absolute blooming nightmare otherwise, or certainly a little bit more difficult to get to grips with. But you could do lots of other things. The other bit that I really liked about the longer you went on adventuring. So, for example, I picked up a trident, which had, not only did it have artifact dice, which is a higher dice rating that adds to your potential for successes and so on. It also then had special abilities, which were, and I think that's a very big strength of this game, and arguably something like Alien as well, another Free League game, where you have the options for the attack of the monsters as well. You have that similarly with artifacts and things. They can do lots of fantastical sort of effects. And having a trident that could call the lightning was great.
Incredibly useful.
So it wasn't just a sort of a slugfest all the time. Once you got into the game, and found other things and other ways around it, excuse me, to use different artifacts and different weapons and different techniques. But also, I think there were also more ways to avoid combat as well. And you're talking about earlier on being very important not to roll, or knowing when to roll, knowing when to leg it from fighting something was a good idea. Although I very rarely did.
You picked up a trident, you fought a dragon for it. That's what you did. So despite it. Yeah, no, I like the monsters. I think it's great. I think it's one of the things that it's a real strength. So I've said this before in other games like RuneQuest or whatever. You have to decide what the opposition's doing, and you have to do that with some of the sort of your moot characters. But monsters have just got a table to roll on, and it's so there's no, you don't feel, not that you ever feel guilty as a GM, but you don't feel that you've sprung something on somebody. Essentially, you say, look, I've got a big table here, I'm going to roll on, and if it's something horrible, it's going to be horrible, and that's just the way it is, So no, I think the combat works really well. I don't know about Neil. What?
Yeah, well, as I was saying, you've got these abilities that you acquire, and knowing when to use those at the right time is really good. So I think I had something where I could fire an arrow and it would ignore armor. Now, we're fighting some sort of heavily armored things that would just bounce off everything you threw at them. But if you could ignore armor for one shot and know that you were going to get a couple of points of damage in, that made a crucial difference a couple of times. So things like that, when you realize what those talents are and when you put them into effect, then it all starts to click and you think, right, I can do something. I feel effective in this world now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a couple of things really. I guess the dice rolling, rolling the sixes and so on. It really, I think I struggle with that. It just feels like, I don't know, rolling the number of times we'd roll loads of dice and you might not get 1 6, and you kind of, you almost like flabbergasted. The chances of that's impossible, It's, and I think it felt like, it's hard. And I guess this is the problem with any dice pool game. It's hard to really understand what your odds are of being successsul.
More dice, better.
Yeah. I mean, there's no denying that. But the other thing I think is, actually, I do think, I know Sam said it's not as lethal as we thought, but actually I do think it was. I just think we're quite lucky. Because it has like a death spiral. So, the minute you start taking damage, you become less effective, and you might only have like 3 or 4 strength. Maybe if you're Ox and you got 6 or 7, but that's, if I imagine most characters are maybe 4 max 5 in most attributes. So, you take 2 or 3 damage and all of a sudden you are 20-30% less effective on your next attack. And so then you just need to be broken and an unlucky roll on the critical table. That's it. It's it's not like your strength is 0, you're dead. That would be really brutal, because that happened quite a lot. But I think it's still potentially very, very deadly. And I think we had a bit of luck, really, because I think some of those critical rolls are quite devastating. And I think the other thing then is, around healing, for example. I'm sure there's other examples. So Tara was a druid, and I decided to put most of her points into healing. And it's probably a good job it did, because I think there was a few times where that was useful, but she couldn't heal herself, so that was like pain in the arse, really. But it kind of makes sense in a way. But she could only heal people who she could only heal strength and whatever, but she couldn't heal wounds, I think it was.
That's
so
right, yeah.
So there were limits. I guess maybe she gets more powerful, that might get better. But overall, I enjoyed combat. I agree with Sam. It was quick, which I think is generally a good thing. Sometimes it's nice to have a little something a bit more, drawn out and tactical. But I think it was quick. I think we quickly learned when to avoid combat. There's that one I particularly think about in the Tower of Quetzal, was it, where we were. Where there were those ghosts with the hands over their eyes, and I think it was Ox and Tarawa stayed to fight them, and Hemini and Mark's character,
that's right,
ran away, and then Mark's character got separated, and he just got battered by
wolves,
by wolves, and even for myself and Sam, and like Tara's nowhere near as good a fighter as Sam, but she's possibly the second best fighter, maybe. I don't know. Or maybe not. Maybe.
Well, we can have an argument about that.
No, I don't want to have an argument.
That's probably
yeah.
Who killed a dragon?
Yeah.
I'm going
to say 30 orcs killed a dragon, and you just stabbed it in the eye. But we don't want to have a debate about that one. And then,
I think the thing about combat is that although Sam's character is tough physically, because the way you set the characters up, you can't, once you've set up your stats, your attributes, you can't change them. So Sam's character is fragile against other types of attacks, like fear attacks, for example. So that could actually break you relatively easily. So the thing is you can't be good at everything. And I think, again, the other side of it is that, yes, intelligent creatures, if they're going to try, once you go down, intelligent creatures have to fail an empathy check to just basically kill you, which they will. Whereas animals, if you go down, they'll just kill you. That's it, done, end. So what they call a coup de grace. So that's what happened to. So that's it's always there as a possibility. And monsters will just mince you anyway because they can. But yeah. So.
The only thing we sort of didn't talk about was magic in combat, which was a little bit sort of hit and miss. I know sometimes I think Howard, who played our resident spellcaster, as opposed to being the druid that Neil was, I think sometimes he felt a little bit on the sidelines because he was very weak, except for casting spells, and if he didn't really have the willpower, was it?
Yes, willpower
to be able to cast the spells, or he'd gone off early and cast them. He ended up being sort of like a little bit more of a marginalised character because he had absolutely no strength. One decent hit, he would have been dead. So I think that was one bit. And again, the magic side of things, or magic in combat, I think you only get really good at it when you're either ultra specialised or you've gone through the several sorts of iterations of spending experience points or whatever to get better.
I mean, there was that time when he boiled that Rust brother in his armor, completely melted him in one shot. I think Hemini is more capable than Howard gives some credit for. So usually it's Howard, what are you going to do? Well, I can't do anything at this point. You go, actually, there's loads of things you can do, but that's all part of the fun. That's Howard's shtick, isn't it? Not being able to do anything, but actually being great. So
I have to say, actually, that's one of the things. I think this game has probably produced more memorable moments than quite a number of other games that I've played. You do remember the big sort of, for me, obviously, Boulder, it was slaughtering a dragon that I didn't have any help with at all from anybody.
All by yourself.
And securing the single biggest treasure that the party had ever found. So, but there were other really, really memorable moments. Now, of course, I'm struggling. Well, there was the Ent, which was attacking as part of the Rust brothers had got it on a chain, hadn't they?
Right, yeah.
The tree monster, whatever you want to call it. Lots and lots of really, really memorable moments. And I think that's I think it's an odd game that it produces them so many and so regularly. I think. Whether that's true.
I think the thing is that you're not meant to be heroes in this game. Was it robbers, rogues, renegades? It's most people you meet are horrible. So,
they are.
Yeah.
Or perhaps that's just the way I play the NPCs. Who knows? But that's the way it is.
Probably.
But yeah. Okay. All right. So combat, as you say, it's got potential to be great. It's relatively quick. It's good fun, but it's not automatically deadly. Another big part of the game is journeys, the journey rules. So it is very procedural. So you travel in quarter days. And I think, certainly as a GM, I've found that sort of being quite strict in terms of how we did that and sort of rations and healing. And so having a really strict calendar was quite important because you want those critical interests to mean something. Although, as you say, with when Tara was struck blind after miscasting a spell, they just sat in a cave for 6 days till it got better.
72 random encounter rolls later.
The lesson learned is, I think, from myself, is to hide the duration, because if you know as a player it's going to be X number of days. Till you get better. I think that's a good point. Hide that, because then we'll go, we'll just knife Tara. Still stuck, and I'm nearly better. No, you're not.
That's the thing. You do feel the time passing, but that's something that in a lot of other games, you're down a dungeon for a couple of hours and that's the adventure. But this, it's like you're seeing the days pass, and you can almost visualize the sun rising and going across the sky, and
weather rolls are the best part of the game.
Weather rolls, so it's something that's you feel like you're living in that world, which is really interesting.
It was also important, I think, from there was like mechanical impact from, like, for example, setting your camp up and so on. So it was really important that we were able to find a good camp spot, and somebody had to make a roll to set up camp, and then we had to set a watch and stuff like that. And then in each phase, and if you've taken any damage to any of your attributes, but you can recover them with a good night's sleep. But if you've got wounds, obviously it's not instant just from getting the sleep, but kind of working all that out and making sure everybody who needs to get to sleep, and everyone, I think that's an interesting part of it. And then there's the random encounter roll, and then whoever's on watch, are they aware of it, and all this? I think it really was a nice part of the system. And we, as Neil says, we were very aware of time passing. It really had that journey structure. I'd almost say it does it better, I think, than the One Ring does.
I agree. I think it does. But it's a different feel, though, isn't it? You wouldn't want to import that sort of level of book into the One Ring. But again, I think it is a more engaging system, because obviously it's of a piece with the rest of the style and the rest of the game, isn't it? Really?
There's more happens. There's more that can potentially happen on a journey. And because I think thinking about that when we encountered, Dave was talking before about the end. and there were some druids weren't there, and these Rust brothers, and I could be wrong, but I think that was a random encounter, and from that, then we got to meet the this
Geralda Bloodbeak.
Yeah, that's right. And then she kind of added to our quest. She gave us insight and stuff like that. And it's just like, yeah, I love that idea that, as a player, but I think also in games I'm running, that kind of, it is emerging play, stuff that just kind of comes out of a random encounter and adds to what's going on and gives us more direction. And, so, and that to me is like, I mean, I know we're not talking about the One Ring, but we have commented on the difference between them. And I just think it does it so well.
I think what's interesting to say about that one is, and we'll talk about strongholds in a second, because I think that's a really important part of the game, because I think it's probably one of the weakest bits. But just to your point, Neil, there, so we've probably been playing because we're playing it weekly, so we're getting our head around the rules, which helped, okay? And I think we were probably about 10, 12 sessions in, and that encounter with that major, non-player character, Geralda Bloodbeak, that was the first time we actually engaged with the scenario or the campaign structure, really. Up till that point, you've just been wandering around, trying not to die, going to a town, offending everybody there, burning it, or just essentially just wandering around causing mayhem. And so, and all of it was based out of a couple of adventure sites. So, Forbidden Lands works on these adventure locations with random encounters in between, and essentially you guys are just having a bit of fun in a sandbox. I mean, Free League do these really great campaigns, but you don't need to have those. I think you can probably just equally as much fun just with your random encounter tables and the core set, to be honest. But yeah, so yeah, it was good fun.
I was just going to say on the, like, I think it made the traveling bit, I think, as Neil H was alluding to, it made the traveling bit no longer either something to be bypassed or hand waved, and it actually added to the game, even though it seems a bit mundane. Okay, roll for setting up a camp, roll for hunting. But actually, it did create. It created another aspect of the game that then became a bit more relevant. And then when you get the random encounters and everything else, it made the story, if you wanted to put it that way, it made it all sort of hang together. So it was no longer, okay, well, you traveled through the day, it's been raining, you've arrived. There was a reason for, there was a mechanical reason, but there was also almost like an adding to the story by traveling. So,
exactly, and there's stuff that just happened. So, like when you came across those Rust brothers that were pursuing a bunch of undead through the forest, who were all dressed as like fools, as like carnival performers, and then you took against them as you always did, and so slaughtered the Rust brothers. Then those undead turned up in a town that you went into later because they'd been fought anyway. So, but it was all emergent, evolving stuff. That wasn't scenario, that was just all wouldn't be interesting if, and isn't that what you want, really? It's stuff that sort of happens based on your impact. Okay, all right, so strongholds. Okay, right, thought.
It's a nice idea, but it costs so much to do it. We did try to start setting up a stronghold to start with, but then abandoned it because it was obviously the town we're in didn't help.
Well, setting up a brewery, really, weren't we?
Yeah, but
that's what we were really
looking at the costs. It does take a huge amount of income, which we just couldn't generate at the time. And in fact, I think a group would find it very difficult to generate enough income overall until a stronghold was situated. Up to that point, you'd be struggling.
Yeah, but we did get two really good hirelings out of that process, though, didn't we? I can't remember their names.
No, I can't remember their names either.
Bill and Ben, wasn't there? Something like
Bill
that.
and Ben, something like that. Yeah.
So I think the strongholds, like the impression I get from having read the game is that you get a stronghold kind of after you've cleared out a dungeon. I think that's the idea. So, so the first tower, the tower we were in the first one, would have been a stronghold. But the problem was, it's like arse end of nowhere, and what's the point? And because if you're going to get anywhere, you've got like hexes and hexes of dangerous terrain to cross. So I think it's probably a combination of finding the right location first of all, something that's empty that but then, as you say, Sam, you've got to then have guards. You've got because if you don't have guards, then the monsters will move back in, and then you've got to start thinking about who feeds the guards and then and all this kind of stuff.
It's very detailed, and I think I think one thing this game doesn't show out is bookkeeping and process. I just wonder whether the benefit in terms of fun.
Yeah.
Do you get the same amount of fun out in terms of the effort you have to put in terms of just keeping track of how much wood you've got, or who's queuing the leather, or whatever it is?
I'm not sure your definition of fun is quite what my definition.
I think maybe if you'd given us more treasure, we would have been able to, attempt at something a little bit better.
I merely apply the rules, Sam. I don't make the rules. I just apply them. Yes, there it is.
I think nice idea, and actually it might be better or easier or more fun when we have been adventuring for a much longer period of time. If you want to talk about
an end game sort of
objectives.
thing. Yeah,
definitely. But I think again, regardless of what point you are in your adventuring career, I think just the amount of paperwork, or you need spreadsheets to do this stuff. And to be honest, I think it's not crucial. You can have great fun. You can go and never have a stronghold and just have great fun. That's fine. Okay. I think as a concept, it's great. I think the actual execution of the rules is probably not what it needs to be, personally. Having looked at it, I'm not sure the payoff for the characters is enough to spend the time on it potentially, but the people do different things in different ways. But
I think it's the same now. I've read a lot of old school games, and they, old school essentials and BXD&D, and I'm sure AD&D, all have rules for building strongholds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Who the hell does that? I mean, come on. I have, in all the years of playing games, I've never once thought, I want my character to settle down and build a castle and whatever.
But it's because when you get to 9th level for a fighter in OSE before you can build a castle. So, you get that far.
A fighter, I'm pretty sure a fighter can build a stronghold at any point if they've got the money. But other classes it is 9th level. But still.
Anyway.
Biggest problem was we couldn't carry enough cash with us in order to set up any sort of stronghold.
Could have bought more ponies.
None of us were strong enough. Well, maybe
we could have paid for a stronghold with torches.
Yeah. I do think the encumbrance rules actually probably worth talking about. I do think they were a bit too restrictive.
I thought they were great. They were
you would, as a cruel, mean GM who likes to see people cry on screen. I knew you'd enjoy that, but it just felt like I think I had strength 3. And it was just useless. It's like I pick up a sword and I had to have
you can't pick anything else up.
That's exactly, you get, you find something on your adventures. Oh, well, who can carry it? No, I can't. I'm too weak. And, it's either ox or Bill the pony.
Or Bill the pony, yeah.
And I ended up dumping my points into the pack rat talent just so I'd be strong enough to lift stuff,
But then you put, because the way that the experience works is as long as you've got a quarter day resting or doing something, not doing anything else, you can try and develop the talents. And I've got, in my head, memories of Tarawa running up and down the street trying to practice carrying things and not succeed on the roll to learn the talent.
Must get strong.
Quarter day after quarter day, just failing to learn the pack rat talent. And that in itself is brilliant.
That's a level of granularity you don't often expect in a game, isn't it? I've been practicing carrying things.
It was still no good.
It was frustrating as all hell. I think there were 3 consecutive days she tried and failed, and then get because I think it's just a straight will roll, isn't it, or something like that?
Yeah.
So
wits roll.
Wits roll. Sorry. So if you wit, her wits is I think it's 4 witches, but most people it's going to be 3 or 4. So your chances of succeeding, you're just this is.
But if you've got somebody that's already got the talent, they can teach you, and you just have to pay them. There's no role.
We piss off everybody.
You do. You either kill them or piss them off.
Yeah. That's where we're going wrong.
Okay, so rules, we think, broadly it works. You have to approach it with a particular mindset, but strongholds not so much, but everything else, it works well. And we were playing it weekly, so we got into the swing of it. We talked a little bit about background campaigns. So the Forbidden Lands is this sort of sealed off area, if you want to say, sort of to the north of this game world. We engage with it a little bit. So you've got a bit of the Rust Brothers, who are this particular religious sect who sort of worship demons and stuff. Who you took against them. You take any opportunity to kill Rust Brothers. It was quite good fun. What did you think about the actual game world? I mean, did it engage you? Or?
Verging on the grimdark, almost. I mean, if we hadn't played
Virgin, it was in it. Both feet.
I mean, Morkborg is like way over the end of grimdark, but this was going towards it. I mean, particularly the town with the slavers. It was horrible.
That was pretty horrible, actually. Yeah, that was definitely lines being crossed there. That was brilliant.
Was that Grindthorpe?
Grindbone.
Grindbone.
You had a song about that, didn't you, Dave?
Possibly. I think Free League have got a bit of a. They do this in a lot of games. So the Simbroom is the same. Forbidden Worlds is the same. Forbidden Lands rather. Forbidden Worlds. Bloody hell. I think again at the outset when you it's a hex crawl, you sort of think, oh, hellfire. But I think what they did was they created rule sets that made hex crawling really good fun. That as Sam, I think you said earlier about the random encounters was great. The fact that it was, we did God knows how many sessions before we even encountered the campaign threads. Shows you that we enjoyed it being a hex crawl. I didn't get the feeling it was limiting in any way. I think it changed on a regular basis. So every time you moved from one hex to another, it was something different. So I really enjoyed it. The world setting I thought was good. I think one thing I really enjoyed was the fact that you could have a halfling alongside a dwarf, alongside a goblin, alongside a wolfkin. I think all that sort of stuff was really good. It was more interesting than well, we're all humans or elves, and that's it.
So I tried to drop in, which you sort of you come up with these what's the word? Rumors or sort of myths and legends and that sort of stuff, and trying to drop in the whole thing about Zytera, who's the demon lord and stuff. And I mean, I just got the sense it was a bit. I mean, I've read it several times. I think it doesn't really make any sense.
Well, it doesn't matter. I think is part of the like to us as characters. I agree with Neil. Dark, grim setting. I really like that. There's the factions and so on are set up for conflict. So everybody hates everybody else for some reason or another, and that came across really well. You go to a settlement, people are distrustful of strangers, and like really distrustful, or they either hate you or they're trying to manipulate you to get something out of you. But I think in terms of the legends, they pop up and you'd read them and you go, oh, that it sounds cool, but you very quickly forget about. I mean, I think it's the same in a lot of games when you get that, like, as you say, Zyga for the sorcerer, this, that, and the other. It kind of quickly fades into the background, and what matters is just the stuff that's immediately going on for you. It does add color. I think it does. Like you talk about like blood mist that used to be here and all that kind of stuff. It definitely adds color, and it gives verisimilitude to the setting. Like why the Rust Brothers summon demons and hate everyone else, and if you dig into it, it's all there.
They're arseholes. It's because they're arseholes.
I think we'll find that everybody, including all of us, we're arseholes as well. That's like a requirement for existing in Forbidden Lands.
It's a given, isn't it?
Yeah. Halflings with tridents.
But no, a great setting. Yeah, I think it was. it was just a bit different from like regular D&D set.
Yeah, yeah. So you can have very mixed parties, and it works quite well.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I mean the some games the system is embedded in the background. This not so much. I think actually you could probably take this system. Yes, you'd have to do some work in terms of items, etc. I think it would work really well in something like Dark Sun, something like that. So any other grim setting where it's like, Simbarum, for example, Davakar, whatever, you could quite easily drop this on top if you prepared the work, and it would work quite well. And I think it stands it sort of does a good fit, or is a good fit for a generic grim fantasy system, and that's it. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I thought it might be good for like a post-apocalyptic Fallout type game, anywhere where you're going through a wasteland and there's sort of weird creatures and factions and.
Or like 2000, Walking Dead. Anyone?
Yeah, that sort of
Mutant Year Zero.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the same. It's obviously the same company, so obviously the games have influenced each other. But you're right, Neil. I think anything like that would work quite well.
The only thing I was going to say, I think this might be my favourite iteration of the Forbidden League system, the Mutant Year Zero system. I think this is really I'm quite impressed with this. Anyway, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, so that's right, and I think Foundry probably helps as well. To be honest, what do you think, Sam, in terms of background?
I just love the map is humongous. There's such a huge area to cover, which we're going to take a long time to do. I think the factions themselves were great because everybody was pecking at everybody else, and we hated everybody else. It was great. So yeah, I think it all works really well.
Yeah,
there's lots of bits of myth and lore which were popping up, which didn't seem to be connected at some points, and then other points were. So that was a little bit difficult to get my head around. We need to at some point get all that stuff together and really work it out.
But I think that interaction you had with Vrel the Bloodbeak, that's almost like, so you've got a few little bits to it, but I think because it is very open world the way it's represented, so you've got various factions and you could do all sorts of things with the factions. I think the GM have to say, right, here's a signpost. Once you've had a bit of a play in the world and got used to it, right, go this way. And then the players will go, right, so at least you know where you're going and why you're doing it.
Yeah.
But that whole thing about finding the Stanangist crown, and you hate the Rust brothers, so anything that's going to kick them in the nuts, that will do. So I think that's essentially it's all set up for success as far as that goes. Okay, so based on the sort of most recent experience compared to how it was back 3 years ago, any surprises? Any sort of, are you surprised that you enjoyed it, or you enjoyed it more, enjoyed it less? We talked a little bit about standout moments.
I was surprised Sam came back to play it, to be honest.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
I flip-flopped quite a bit.
I was surprised, yeah.
And no, I did flip-flop quite a bit because that first few sessions was really difficult. Just really hard to do anything, and didn't really find it that enjoyable at that point. Yeah. But now we've really worked out how to do things and know what we're doing. It has turned into quite an interesting and useful system.
Yeah. And I guess
it's I think one of the best iterations of the Mutant Year Zero system. I think
that's an interesting observation as well, because it does take you some games. Sometimes you just do have to dig a bit deeper to
persevere.
But when you get there, it's really well worth it.
I think I was quite surprised that I wanted to play it again, but I genuinely thought at the end of it that we maybe hadn't done it justice. And I think having a downer on the game without really letting it go, it was the first time I think all of us had played it. But the testament to how much fun it was is subsequent to this second batch of playing, I've gone and bought it. I know, Sam, you've gone and bought it. But Neil B, did you buy it? Neil H, did you buy it as well?
I've got the PDFs, but
I had it previously, but yeah.
And, I'd love to play. I'm a bit reluctant maybe to play it face to face because I think there's so many moving parts. I think I probably would only do it virtually via Foundry, but
and the Foundry implementation, the official one, is brilliant. and the Kickstarters they've done, so that you get all the modules sort of including that. It's been absolutely fantastic. There is years worth of play in this sort of stuff. I mean, for me, I really, really enjoy running it. I love just the group are great. You know, I think everyone's into the right spirit, as you know, always the case, really. I think Foundry really helps with that. It's one of those games that I'm going to keep coming back to. You know, like the One Ring is one that we sort of do, and then we have to take a break and come back to it. And I think, you know, Forbidden Lands is, because I think there's just so much potential in there, and we just laugh when we're playing it, don't we? When it all goes horribly wrong, it's all
the absurdity of everything. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Well, you try and heal somebody and you go blind for 6 days.
Hilarious.
I think the other thing is, what was interesting that was the reaction when we finished this time.
Yeah,
I think everybody was genuinely disappointed that we were stopping.
Yeah,
it was probably the right thing to do, so that, you know, you do keep that interest and you know, and desire to play it again. But I genuinely, I was quite not upset. You know, I didn't lie asleep at night crying into my pillow, but it was a million miles away.
well, there's always the One Ring to look forward to. But I think if you're going to, advice for people picking it up, okay, if they're going to pick it up and play it, I mean, from my perspective, you know, I tend to buy all the stuff anyway, so that's just how it goes. But I think really, if you've just got the box or just the core Foundry system and a module, that's plenty. That's loads to be going at in there to start with. I would suggest, if you're all new players, probably give it 3 or 4 sessions with practice characters just to get your head into it, right? And then which essentially what we did was then go with a break and then go, right, we understand how it works now, and then redo your characters so that you know, that they fit. I think having focused characters really helps, you know, and cover all the bases. And yeah, so don't worry about strongholds till much further down the line. You don't need to worry about them. It's interesting to read, but that's it. What about from your perspective as players? What would you advise? Hitting some tips.
I think, I mean, it's been mentioned before, but you just get a bit familiar with the system. You know, take your time creating your character. I think there's the things like the Pride and Darkness. I don't think we use them probably as much as
it's one of those things we forgot quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's easy to forget them. I think part of that, I think, is just, you know, you say the Foundry implementation is great, and it is. That's on a different tab, and so it's unless you're going to look at it, you know, you can forget about it. But I think just, you know your character, get to know the system a little bit, and just be prepared for a bit of pain. You know, I think. And
not being very heroic.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't fight everything. Yeah,
I'd probably say, from the perspective of starting out characters, make yourself good at something and make yourself pretty good at something else. Don't just put all your eggs in one basket, because I doubt you'll get the most from it. Because I refer back to that sort of, you know, the idea of being able to do more than one thing reasonably well is better than doing one thing really well. I would be my only sort of observation. I think
it would really help to have a conversation between characters before you actually finish your characters, just so everybody has the right sort of skill level in something like, so you see someone with scouting, someone with survival, some combat machines, that sort of thing. Otherwise, you know, everybody's got nothing in survival, you're in big trouble.
And so we're looking at that party organization chart for Journeys, is knowing that, you know, everybody's got a role to play, and you're not necessarily going to be doing the same thing all the time, but you can see what people are doing, how they split up, and, you know, that having that organization and the mindset that, you know, you've all got a role to play, and then it all works out.
Having a little bit of backup as well, because inevitably the person who makes camp gets injured and can't do the role anymore, and then you're stuffed. So, sorry, Sam.
Picking talents is really quite useful. Picking the right talents for what you're going to do. There's a big selection of general talents that everybody can pick from, and there are like 3 levels of talent for each one. Picking the right ones really makes a big difference in the game. I know you've got Pack Rat, for example, Neil. Yeah. I mean, I've got the chef talent for my character, which helps create food. There's all sorts of other little general useful ones which you can which would really help you.
Yeah.
Yes, pick the right
so I think we're all kind of saying, broadly speaking, the same thing, but from lots of different angles, which is when you're starting out, that session 0, I think, is probably very, very important for this game. And you have, I think, the point, Neil H, that you made about maybe actually start with that template, the travel template. Okay, who's going to be the one who makes the camp? Who's the scout? Who's the survival expert? And then try and work back almost from that. But be able to do more than one thing.
Yeah.
You can scout, make sure you can.
A lot of experience in this game, so it's relatively, as long as you can find someone to train you, and you're used to succeed. But potentially you've got lots of points that you can put into skills and talents, and skills and that sort of thing. And it's not too expensive to get up in ability. I think the thing is you need to be quite strategic, really, don't you? So it's this is that session 0, that planning thing, and I think that's where give it a quick run, few sessions just with disposable characters to get your head into it, and then say, right, okay, now we're going to start, because then you'll have a sense of actually how the world works. And I think it does repay that. You do get an awful lot more out of it once you start to go, right, we can't just run at this. We have to treat it seriously. Serious play. That's what it's all about. Right. Okay.
Always serious.
Always serious. So thanks very much, guys, for the time. I think that was great. Any sort of final points from you guys before we wrap it up? Any final thought?
I think just a final thought is it needs a really good theme tune. The Forbidden Lands. I just think it could really benefit from one. Hearing
the Bell Tolls by Metallica, that was good.
Yeah, some thundering drums and screaming guitar licks. I think that's what you need.
Forbidden Land, forbidden. Don't go to the Forbidden Land because you can't.
If you go to the Forbidden Land,
it's forbidden. Sorry.
Maybe sparks.
I'd say thanks to Steve for running on Foundry, because Foundry was a real eye opener for this game. I think if we'd done it face to face, it would have been a completely different experience. And some of the maps he used for it were really, really awesome. Some of those
all the little details, like the clouds scudding across and birds circling. And
well, that's so I used Epic Isometric. A lot of those sort of 3D, which I think they work really well for that game. It was
zone based, but it does work really well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Good stuff. No, it's my pleasure as always to run these games.
Thanks very much.
It's good stuff.
Too much pleasure sometimes, Steve. I think.
Yeah, some of the noises that come down that microphone are just a little bit disturbing.
Can we see your hands, please, Steve?
I got little hands.
He lifts his fake hands up.
Hairy palms. Right, on that sordid note, take it easy. All right.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Here's a
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another exploration of my gaming vexes. If you've got any thoughts you'd like to add to what you've heard here, or a gaming vex of your own you'd like to offer up for discussion, you can get in touch with me on Blue Sky via @allanth.bsky.social or via Discord as allanth.vex. Until next time, may all of your games be free of vexatiousness and be excellent to each other always.